The extent of devastation really only becomes clear once you leave Marrakesh. We've been traveling to many different villages every day. Absolute hell and grief. They've lost everything. They've lost their homes, their communities, if not entire families. I don't even begin to understand what that is like. I'm Stefanie Dekker, Senior Foreign Correspondent at Al Jazeera English, covering the earthquake in Morocco. And between us, the extent of the devastation of these remote mountain villages makes you question whether some of them can ever be rebuilt. On the night of the 8th of September, Friday night, just past 11 p.m., the earth and the mountains shook. The extent of the devastation across the villages of the Atlas Mountains is something extraordinary. The devastation is massive, it is absolute. The first village we went to, Imintala, we walked in and the first thing that hit me was the smell of death. And I looked around and I thought to myself, this is a graveyard. This is an unmarked graveyard. People are using their hands, using pickaxes. And at that point, you still had some hope. You had families sitting there waiting, hoping that some of their loved ones would be retrieved from beneath the rubble. You had a lot of volunteers, also the Moroccan firefighters, trying to go through rubble. You can see the rubble around me. With their hands. Very little heavy equipment, impossible to get to these areas. So that is really what hit us all when we walked in, sort of the complete annihilation of these mountain villages. And one of the specific things also of this village is how a section of the mountain had just detached and descended and flattened large parts of it. These are nurses. Hi. Do you work here?
Yes, we work here.
3 nurses told us that they had to walk to some of these villages to help people. They needed more medicine, they needed more help. So you saw this resilience and this strength from these very young girls, graduated from medical school just 2 years ago, carrying the responsibility of the health of 28 villages. So they really stuck with us. People have come together to help. They rushed into the mountains, and of course that comes with logistical challenges because the roads are so small. So suddenly you have much more vehicle traffic, much more congestion. Really, in a lot of these remote places, it is ordinary people that we saw on the ground, handing out food, water, sandwiches, blankets, shoes, slippers in one particular village.
This is where I lived with my parents. My mother was in that room. That's where she died, along with my wife.
We've seen people break down. One man took us to the door of his house. He'd lost 2 sons and he was explaining what had happened, and at some point he just sat down and started sobbing. Families sitting outside, waiting, watching volunteers go through the rubble with their hands, hoping at that point for a body to be retrieved so they could at least have the dignity of burying them. I think it's very difficult to understand what they're going through. The grief that we've seen that have affected us all, I mean, even in our team, we'd start crying because you see the utter desperation and utter grief of these people. And there's nothing you can do to help them other than document their stories and keep reiterating of how important it is to try and get help to these places. What we've seen is utter annihilation of village after village after village, of community after community. And the question is, can they be rebuilt? Getting to these places with heavy equipment like bulldozers that are essential for the removal, first of all, of the rubble and then the rebuilding, I think just the logistical challenge is incredibly difficult. I don't think many of these places will ever be the same. It seems like a lot of these villages may actually have to be rebuilt elsewhere, and of course that comes with a whole change of life for people. Many people don't want to leave. People want to know what's next for their homes, and I think that is a huge question moving forward. I think it's always hard to leave a story like this. Things stay with you. You cannot, as a human being, be immune to the amount of grief that you see.